Warning. This episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Give us 1 hour and we'll help you change the way you think about happiness. Harvesting Happiness with Lisa Cypers-Kamen is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. Each week, Lisa spotlights diverse trendsetters and change agents who are the greatest contemporary thinkers and doers, devoting their lives to creating a better world in which to live. Your host, Lisa Cypers-Kamen, is a widely recognized applied positive psychology expert, author, documentary filmmaker, and lecturer specializing in optimal lifestyle management. Let's get to it. Here's Lisa.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us on today's show, where you will learn how to cultivate love, peace, and compassion in a world full of pain and restlessness. My first guest is Dr. Ravi Chandra. Let's join the conversation. He is a psychiatrist, writer, and a distinguished fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. His book, Face Buddha, Transcendence in the Age of Social Networks, is his first nonfiction debut and the winner of the 2017 Nautilus Silver Book Award for Religion and Spirituality of Eastern Thought. He's a friend of the show, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you back, Ravi. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Lisa. I really appreciate your inviting me.
Well, you and I hit it off the first time you came to the show, and we agreed it must have been close to a year ago that you'd come back and we'd talk about social media and politics. So here we are.
Yes, with the flames rising around us.
Yes, Rome is burning, or, we're sort of in the sad United States of America.
Right. Well, I mean, I think, obviously there are so many traumas that are surfacing right now. And I think our political situation is just putting salt on the wound or fuel on the fire, et cetera. It's so toxic. And social media, of course, can become very toxic. And I anticipate it becoming more toxic as the year continues towards the election cycle.
Talk a little bit about the toxicity of social media, because I think we can all agree that the internet and sort of the digisphere can be used for the greater good, but most often it's not.
Well, there's so many levels of that. First of all, as we know, Twitter recently stopped doing political ads. Facebook has kind of some hand-waving reasons why they're continuing political ads, which I've seen so many examples of outright lies and just disparaging comments, et cetera, being targeted to voters who might be susceptible to these kinds of messages. So I'm certainly worried that the campaigns and perhaps third parties are going to stir the pot and turn us against each other, and the messages of unity and of clear reasoning will not get through. And then, of course, in our own news feed, depending on the algorithm basically favors the more, in quote unquote, engaging posts, which are often the most controversial, the negative, et cetera, because that's what gets the angry emojis and the comments, et cetera, going. And so I think that the medium itself, on Facebook in particular, tends to aggravate and just like Twitter, become an auxiliary amygdala, just going straight to the primitive parts of our brain, our survival brains, where we go into fight, flight, and freeze. And so all of these emotions get stirred up, and we react, but yet we don't often enough engage our higher centers, which are about relationship, long-term planning, kindness, and compassion. And so that's the challenge, I think, for each of us as we engage on social media, but in our lives in general. I think it's easier in a real world relationship to have those kind of long-term planning and compassion neurons and that part of our frontal cortex engage. But it's a challenge online.
I hear you. And I love what you just called social media, the auxiliary amygdala. And it's kind of true, right? Like It can fire us up in a nanosecond where we lose all reason, accountability, judgment, morality. It's just gone. Poof. We see something that fires us up and we've lost it.
Right. It's called cyber disinhibition, but I call it cyber dysregulation. This kind of just a total change of our personalities, which can happen online. And I think I've certainly tried to to avoid that kind of political furor, but it happens. And then I'm concerned for my friends who are in distress, but I always feel it's hard to as the Buddha said, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. And it's hard to do that online, to really be that voice of peace, etc., because it's just, just typing text and images onto a screen does not capture our humanity, does not transmit our humanity. So
I would argue that it's stimulating. The very act of the tapping and the clicking is stimulating to the brain, right? It's activating us. It is not soothing us.
Sure, exactly. I think it's great if you can throw in a cat video or humor. Humor I think is great. That's one of my favorite parts of engaging on social media is just to enjoy other people's humor and share a joke myself. But when it gets into distressing, disturbing issues, the issues of trauma, we tend to get into the blame cycle, blame, shame, scapegoating, etc., and away from related understanding and relationship and interdependent identity.
Well, when we talk about being traumatized by the political climate and by what's going on in the news and whatever is external, whatever is out there that is happening that gives us a sense of feeling traumatized and overwhelmed and unable to really manage, what we're seeing and feeling. How do you counsel people to find a way to deal with this? Because I have clients that will say that, there are times when they're so overwhelmed, they can't function.
Right. Well, certainly a media diet is important to remember what brings you back to yourself. And on my website, facebuddha.co, there's a mindfulness-based look at your own social media use, and you can kind of see how and kind of chart how social media is affecting you, what it's like when you take a break, and then you can make rational decisions about how you want to engage. You
also have a lecture series available. I want to just give a shout out to that because I love your work. And on your website, ravichandramd.com, within your portfolio, there is a viewable series where you talk about this and more.
Yes, that's right. It was an 8-week lecture series that I did covering compassion in difficult times, self-compassion, Asian American psychology, narcissism in the American psyche and relatedness in the American psyche, and technology and psychology.
Let's talk a moment about the Declaration of Independence. Let's go way back to the founding fathers and invisible mothers, because they were there, and talk a little bit about our national identity and the intent of your belief and mine, I think, because we share similar views of the Declaration of Independence.
Right. I think the Declaration of Independence is such an inspiring document, and I think it was revolutionary then, and it's revolutionary now. This idea that the Creator, whatever you imagine that to be, has given us equality and the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I think that idea of equality, even though at the time of the founding, that was limited to white, wealthy property owners, male property owners. So it was not true then. But we've done, I think, over the course of history, Americans have tried to make this more and more true. And I think that's such a powerful concept that no matter what station we have in life, whatever we're doing, et cetera, there's an underlying common humanity and equality that I think it's so important to connect to as human beings, and not because, I think in the last 50 years, America has become particularly individualistic and narcissistic, and therefore competitive and antagonistic. And I think all of these emotions of social comparison, jealousy, antagonism, envy, and so forth are so much part of our psychic makeup, and especially with social media. And I think we just have to kind of undo that and really connect to our common humanity and equality to really find that happiness. And maybe even, to really have a deep national discussion about what happiness is, and how we can achieve it. I think, again, in the last 50 years or so, or certainly since post-war prosperity, happiness has been equated with getting what you want, materially. And I think that's totally wrong, and that's totally unsupported by research as well.
Oh, well, we can go on and on and on about that. And I think most importantly is the recognition that when we get what we want or what we think we want, right, it's only a letdown, right? Because then we're seeking that next thing, that next adrenaline rush in pursuit of what it is that we think we want or need. And it's externally referenced.
Right, exactly. And so, I talk about happiness a lot with my patients. And, there's so many definitions. I think certainly meeting goals is important, having a sense of meaning or purpose in life.
Yes.
Having a certain basic financial security. Yes, that's important. But beyond that, it doesn't add to happiness. But I think, for me and for my patients who are going through distress, I think I define happiness as an increasing capacity to deal with distress and difficult emotions. So having that recognition that one can get through the difficult times, I think that's another definition of happiness that we have to kind of feed into our system.
I agree with you. I also think that happiness, in my own experience and in working with clients, is also the absence of suffering. That when we can get ourselves regulated to a place where we recognize, yes, suffering is part of the human condition and it will not impede my happiness. I just choose not to perceive the suffering as anything more than it is.
Right. And maybe even, in the ideal circumstance, to treat our difficulties as a kind of treasure that we can use to really build ourselves and grow with the experience. So that idea of post-traumatic growth, I think, is important. But suffering has been a great teacher for me. And we're going through a lot of trauma and suffering right now nationally. But in some way, I think it can take us back to what's really important. And certainly it's what's done that for me. I've started teaching compassion and self-compassion courses and kind of doubling down on what I think is important and missing from the national conversation, which is about relationship and our connection with others and our interdependence. And I think this is founded on compassion. So in that sense, the suffering of the National Times has really brought out, I think, what's important for me.
I agree. Let's go take a break. And when we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Dr. Ravi Chandra. To learn more about Ravi and his beautiful work, please visit ravichandramd.com, on Twitter at going2peace, and it's the number 2. On Facebook, we are going to check out Ravi Chandra, psychiatrist and writer. And on Instagram, it's Ravi Chandra, MD. Here comes that pause. We'll be right back, and that is a promise.
To learn more about cultivating sustainable well-being at home and the office, visit harvestinghappiness.com and explore Lisa's experiential on-site brain fitness workshops, corporate programming, and speaking engagement services.
Welcome back to the show. If you're just joining us now, we're continuing the conversation with Dr. Ravi Chandra, learning how to cultivate love, peace, and compassion in a world full of pain and restlessness. Ravi, we have so much to cover and there's so little time, but you've given us some tools and some insight into our human brains and how we are stimulated by social media and our devices. And you talk a little bit about the Declaration of Independence and going back to the foundation of America and some of those qualities of a kinder, more just and moral time. Let's talk a little bit about the pursuit of happiness. And you gave us some good basis for human happiness that comes from having meaning in our lives. And you talk a little bit about the necessity of living in a state of united interdependence.
That's right. I mean, I think, we all come into the world with a common humanity as human beings. And then from that, there's some kind of, we develop relationships and often some kind of disconnection or wound or trauma, could be based on our identities, could be based on things that happen to us, et cetera. So there's that trauma or wound that we have of disconnection. And from that, I think there's a kind of a parallel process that develops. On the one side, there's the kind of cycle of trauma, which is about really trying to, I think, in its, to be most generous, to try and create control and safety for the traumatized individual. So it could be about avoiding trauma, the traumatic triggers, could be about blame and shame and scapegoating, pushing away those things that we find dangerous. And that's really, that really keeps going on. And it could lead to anxiety, depression, just a complete involution. But a lot of toxicity can happen out of that. And then parallel processing with that, there's the development of relationship and a cultivation of connection and compassion for self and other. And I think both of those things are going on in most wounded or traumatized people. And I think, diffusing the trauma cycle, which, trying to win antagonistically in some way in the extreme forms, splitting the world into good and bad. I mean, that has to, I think, be diffused and to get to a felt experience of common humanity and interdependent identity. So I think, just noticing the trauma cycles as they come up and working with them with mindfulness, compassion, and relationship in order to get to that more peaceful state where you're aware of what traumatizes, but you're not overwhelmed by it.
Let's talk a little bit about connecting with the other. Because we are in such a polarized state that we often think, well, if this person is not like me, if their thought process and their values seemingly are not like mine, I don't want to be around them. I don't want to be near them. They're bad. They're wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the ways to better manage when we have those feelings is to go the opposite way, to lean in and get curious and ask questions and discover that we are not different from the other.
Absolutely. Curiosity and understanding are so important. I understand why, people get, either hostile or angry when ideas or people they don't relate to, or people who have traumatized them, show up. That's understandable because again, we're trying to create control and safety. But I think where does our real sense of safety comes from? I think it is that sense of connection. So you're right. Exactly. Opening to those moments with curiosity. And trying to encourage empathy in others as well, is so important.
It's funny. I got a call last week to do a radio tour for a network whose name shall remain nameless for the sake of this discussion, but their views in general are very dissimilar to mine. And I thought, what an opportunity to go and talk about human happiness and well-being in a time of turmoil and ask questions to see where I'm more alike that other person than unlike them. And it was a very satisfying experience because I was skeptical in doing it and I was glad that I did it.
Yeah, that's so great. What was your experience like, being there with people who were different or had different ideas?
Well, one of the hosts was really a Bible thumper. So that was a bit different than my worldview. And he kept wanting me to talk about going to God as the only pathway to happiness. And I wasn't willing to go there. I was willing to say the research says that people who have a spiritual practice, whether it is religion or knitting, tend to experience greater joy in their life because they're connected to something greater than themselves. He wasn't happy with me because he wanted God to be part of the conversation. And I just kept citing the research.
That's really hard. I mean, I have a hard time talking to people who are very certain in their beliefs, and it doesn't leave a lot of room for communication. And so I so appreciate your willingness to do that. That's another thing I think we gotta figure out is how to get out of our own hard-headed certainties and encourage other people to be more fluid and related. It's kind of that a way for them, I think, to have control and power in a situation. And it can feel very strong, but it's so unrelated and it makes everyone else feel disconnected, I think. So I think, we've got to all work on not being so hard-headed, I think, and being open and, like you said before, being curious and try to understand and have empathy for people who have different identities or different ideas.
Well, I think when we start to see that person whose views are so much different than our own, when we start to see them as a human being that wants safety, security, prosperity, good health, good family, good connection. Those are all of the things that each of us want that is available to us from our own effort and not some political doctrine.
Absolutely. I totally agree. But I also think that the thing that we've obviously got to, we're at peak narcissism right now, and peak self-centeredness. I mean, this is according to research and just what's happening in our polarized political environment. And I think all the religions really are about overcoming self-centeredness. At the core of every religion, there's that quality. So I think we do have to, realize certainty, while it does provide this false sense of safety, is also very self-centered. And, I think, that's another thing we've got to kind of transcend, to be able to to hold our opinions with less attachment, I think, is so important for being non-self-centered.
Yeah, less attachment to outcome and desire and more of the neutral observer or the witness, right? And then be able to harness our reactivity to these things as they happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just, but it's so great that you had these conversations. I wish I could have, my lecture series was one way to kind of have a conversation in some sense with people who maybe I'm not meeting in person, but I can give some information to and, hopefully start some dialogue along the way.
These are important conversations and they're great connectors. They're great conversation starters, to see ourselves in the other. And perhaps that mollifies some of this aggression that a lot of us are harboring.
Right. I mean, I'm so fortunate you're running this great radio show, and I'm fortunate to be a therapist. So I'm having deep conversations with dozens of people a week, so it's just so transformative, and it brings you down to that sense of, deepens that sense of caring about another person, being open to them. And, I'm so grateful for my profession, that I'm able to do that. And I think we all, do better, in conversation. And we need to have more of those.
We do. We need to keep talking and use good reason, get out of the blame game. I mean, I'm reiterating some of your own beautiful talking points that, learn to identify, you write, with our own work and work with those difficult emotions with mindfulness, compassion, and relationship. This is what you want to teach us.
Yeah, and going back to that founding document, the Declaration of Independence and the Pursuit of Happiness, I think what's happened with individualism in the last 50 years is that we think if we're not happy, then something must be wrong, and
Yes.
particularly that someone's to blame. I'm not happy, so it must be someone's fault. I think that's so common, especially when we're stressed. That can happen to any of us, but it's something to overcome. It's like, how can we take responsibility for our own happiness and also be a source of happiness for others, and get out of the blame game? Exactly. I think it's, such an antagonistic way to live one's life.
Be a joy generator, get out there and be, like you say, be the source of happiness for yourself, for others. And, this is what we always talk about it being an inside job. And that might sound very trite, that being happiness. But really, we should be the ones that know ourselves the most and therefore know how to make ourselves joyful.
Absolutely. And, right. And, we, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Right. And that's in all religions as well. And if we're a source of happiness for others, if we're giving, if we're generous, you get that back.
Yeah.
And it feels good to be generous in spirit and materially, etc. So I think these are all, important religious principles that I think no religion would disagree with. But we just got to, I think, act out. I mean, it's also research based as well. So, there's a lot of evidence for what Dr. Keltner says, that we're born to be good. That's his book of the same name. So we can bring out these qualities.
Ravi, thanks for your generosity in giving your time and hanging out with me today. To learn more about the work of Dr. Ravi Chandra, please visit ravichandramd.com, on Twitter at Going to Peace. And again, the 2 in Going to Peace is the number. On Facebook, that page is Ravi Chandra, psychiatrist and writer. And on Instagram, Ravi Chandra MD. You can also check out his lecture series that is available on his website, which I mentioned. I'll say it again, ravichandramd.com. And the book is Face Buddha, Transcendence in the Age of Social Networks. Ravi, always a delight. We're going to have to come back and hang out again and talk about the political climate in a few months.
Sounds good. I look forward to that.
Me too. Here comes the break.
Did you know that happiness is actually good for your health? Happy people live longer, are more productive, and make better partners, parents, and professionals. Connect with us on Facebook at Harvesting Happiness and follow Lisa on Twitter at Lisa Kamen for a daily dose of inspiration.
And we are back talking about the cultivation of love, peace, and compassion in a world full of pain and restlessness. My next guest is Lama Palden Drolma. She is the author of Love on Every Breath, a licensed psychotherapist, spiritual teacher, and coach. She has studied Buddhism in the Himalayas with some of the most preeminent Tibetan masters of the 20th century. Following a traditional 3-year retreat under his guidance, Kalu Rinpoche authorized her to become one of his first Western lamas. She subsequently founded the Sukha Siddhi Foundation, a Tibetan Buddhist teaching center in Fairfax, California. And she's here today, and I'm so eager to learn about her story and her work. Lama Palden, thanks for joining us on the show.
My pleasure.
I would love to hear your story. I'm actually waiting with bated breath to hear your story and how you came to be a Lama.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Marin County, Northern California, the Bay Area, quite a liberal place. And I was always very interested in spiritual things. My earliest memories of that go back to 3 years old. And then I was raised Episcopalian, very liberal. And then when I got into my teens, I really started doing a lot more inquiry and studying Gandhi and all kinds of different religions and starting to learn meditation. And that went on in my 20s. I became really more serious about that, doing a lot of yoga every day, sitting zazen, studying mystical Christianity and Sufism and all of these kinds of things, pursuing a path towards spiritual unity, divine union, and really unfolding more into the, I don't know what you'd say, like into awakened presence, pure being. And then about the age of 25, I began praying to meet my teacher. I figured I really needed a primary teacher. And a Sufi friend sort of dragged me off, convinced me after talking to me for hours to come with him to San Francisco across the bridge to meet a Tibetan Lama, hear him speak. And we got there, and as soon as I saw this Lama, who was about in his early 70s at the time, I just knew he was my teacher. So that was 42 years ago, and that has never really wavered. Definitely, he's my teacher. He's passed on now, but I had the incredible opportunity of studying with him, mainly in the Himalayas for 12 years, off and on, and then doing the 3-year retreat under his guidance. And I had longed to do retreat for many years, and then it turned out he was the main retreat master among the Tibetans in the 20th century. The first one to establish long retreats after they had to leave Tibet. And so those two things came together, and I was able to do 3-year retreat, which I did up on Salt Spring Island in British Columbia at a retreat center my teacher has up there. And that was extremely hard work, very challenging, but the most rewarding and fulfilling thing I've ever done with my time in this life. And afterwards, about a year later, my teacher authorized me as a Lama. I'd never really thought about teaching or wanted to, but then after that, people started asking me to teach. And then eventually, about 10 years later, I founded a Tibetan Buddhist center here in Marin County. So that's my story. And part of the time I was studying in the Himalayas with him and other great Tibetan masters, I also had the good fortune of living in Bhutan for 4 years, which this was the late 70s, early 80s. It was so remote. There were almost no Westerners that had ever been there. But that was also an incredible experience. It was unbelievably relaxing there for me and very nourishing spiritually.
Let me ask you how this worked with your sort of Western life as a licensed psychotherapist and as a coach. You have blended these two very different kinds of technology.
Yes, actually, I became a therapist after 3-year retreat. I went back to grad school a few years after 3-year retreat and started then doing psychotherapy, spiritual coaching, counseling, etc. So it was really because growing up in Marin as a teenager in the late 60s, I made a real determination inside myself around age 15, 16, that the psyche, the spirit, and the body were all super important in the journey of transformation and the spiritual path. So I've always been committed to the joining and working with all three of those. So, hence a lot of yoga, a lot of that kind of thing, plus spiritual work, plus in-depth psychological work, both inside of myself and then, in grad school studying, of course, and then in working with others. So it's really been very seamless joining those together. And I think when we work on all aspects of ourselves, then transformation happens much more quickly.
You call the meditation that you teach in the book, as well as the book's name, Love on Every Breath. Describe the type of meditation and how you came up with the name.
Okay, yeah. So this meditation I'm teaching in the book, which I'm calling Love on Every Breath, is a very extraordinary form of a practice called Tonglen in Tibetan, which has to do with taking in the suffering of the world, having it transform in the heart chakra, and then being sent out as healing energy and awakened love and wisdom. And so that's done on the breath in the practice. And besides the fact that this practice actually consciously, you can breathe in your own suffering of your own human self, have it transform through a sense of awakened presence in the heart. And of course, the book goes into a lot of detail about how to do this. And then in that transformation, the suffering, the pain is transformed, as I said, into healing energy, awakened energy, but it's also transformed into white light. And this light is, you breathe that out. So it's actually, the meditation is done on the in-breath and out-breath, hence the name. And, it's fine to do it not coordinated with the breath, but that's the traditional way of doing it. And a lot of us are taking in suffering all the time, or feeling our own suffering or other people's suffering, and it just kind of gets stuck inside of us. And this practice is a very profound way to actually allow that to be transformed and liberated in our hearts, and then manifest back out as an energy that is very helpful for ourselves and others.
So for somebody who is unfamiliar with meditation, but very familiar with suffering, how might you guide them to become aware of the breath and the skill set necessary to apply love to the breath?
Good question. Yeah. Well, the book goes step by step. There's 8 steps, and then each one I explain, in depth. So the first, which really relates to your question of becoming aware of the breath, the first is what I'm calling resting in open awareness. And that's where, again and again, we let go of thoughts and we just rest in our direct experience, what's happening right now in this moment. And obviously, a lot of times thoughts come up about the past, thoughts come up about the future, and we're constantly kind of evaluating or judging the present moment. And so again and again, we let go of all that. We let go of evaluating, judging, past and future thoughts, and instead open really wholeheartedly to what's here, what we're experiencing right here in this moment, in our felt sensation, in the, awareness of what's inside and outside of us. And in that slowing down and really paying attention and focusing on the here and now, that's where we then become aware of our breath. And the breath is an amazingly powerful tool for awakening and for healing, for transformation. It's an amazing tool. For example, in psychotherapy, if somebody's experiencing something painful, really working on some old stuck, trauma or pain or confusion, just simply breathing into that with awareness is very transformative and liberating. And so the breath in a lot of meditation practices and in yogic practices is really valuable for working with the process of liberation.
What's interesting is the breath is a natural anti-anxietal if we use it.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I found too. Like if I feel a little bit anxious, I really bring my breath down to my abdomen and consciously breathe. And it's very grounding, and it helps relieve anxiety. The breath and then working with the breath consciously is really amazing.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Lama Palden Drolma. To learn more about her work, please visit www.lamapalden.com. lama.org. On Twitter, you can find her at Lama Palden. And on Facebook, that page is Lama Palden Droma. The book we're speaking of today and the practice that we are talking about is Love on Every Breath. Here comes the break. We'll be right back, and that is a promise.
Who says money can't buy happiness? Whether you are a skeptic or seeker, check out Lisa's new book. Are we happy yet? 8 Keys to Unlocking a Joyful Life. A boot camp manual for greater emotional fitness is available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, IndieBound, and HarvestingHappiness.com. Here's a truth bomb. Emotions are contagious, and happiness is a universally desired state. But we tend to forget that we all have the freedom to be happy or the liberty to be miserable each day, regardless of external circumstances. Explore the journey of human happiness, how to find it and keep it, with Lisa's documentary film, H Factor. Where is your heart? Visit HarvestingHappiness.com to learn more.
Happiness, yeah.
Welcome back to the show. We're continuing the conversation with Lama Palden Droma, talking about how to cultivate love, peace, and compassion in a world full of pain and restlessness. So, Lama Palden, let's go back to the breath and the challenge of the breath in being alive, because many of us, when we are impacted by stress or anxiety or life's events, we hold the breath, the life force that is so necessary for our well-being. We do the opposite.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's an unconscious habit pattern of we think if we hold our breath, we won't have to feel, but it's a very unconscious process. And in meditation practice, we can begin to be conscious of our breath and work with it consciously, skillfully. We can learn to, even out the breath, to stay present with the breath. And the breath is an amazing tool to help bring the mind-body together into harmony.
And the use of breath, proper breath work or good breath work will also help reduce cortisol in the body.
I didn't realize that. Interesting.
Right? So you're being able to manage adrenaline. I don't know. I'm going to speak for myself and have a hunch that our listeners might, from time to time, experience anxiety and stress and the worry. And that sort of stimulates the body's fight or flight system. And the breath and the meditation practice helps cool it down.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. There's something about the combination of awareness and breath when those are joined, or we could say attention and breath, that is really amazing to, like you're saying, to relieve anxiety, to calm our whole system down, just to settle and ground.
Yeah. Talk about love for a moment, because the choice of words for the name of the book and the practice, to me sounds like the application of love to the places that hurt.
Exactly. And Tibetan Buddhism, there's 2 main aspects to the path in terms of Tibetan Buddhism and the way they talk about the spiritual path. And one is the cultivation of wisdom, and one is the cultivation of love and compassion. So love in this sense is really, and what I'm talking about in the book are 2 things: learning to really open to and love oneself, to realize that all beings are worthy of love, including ourselves, and to really, through kindness and compassion, to open more and more to actually loving ourselves, and likewise with others. And not, it's very important, those people that are close to us in our life, that's very precious. And also within Buddhist practice, we have the motivation and intention to open our hearts to all beings, nothing to do with excusing behavior, but simply to open to all peoples in their equality, in their worthiness as human beings, and to engender compassion and loving kindness for everybody's suffering and struggles. And through that, to allow our innate loving kindness and compassion to blossom.
And therein lies the rub for many people, because they will say, oh, yes, I'm a loving person, I'm a kind person. And then you mentioned, or they mentioned, somebody who they believe has betrayed them, or perhaps has perpetrated a trespass against them, or someone they love. And they sort of write that out of their heart. No, I can't do it for that person. And I think this is where the practice comes in with this, because that's the challenge, to do it for that person.
Exactly. And I have a whole section in the book on that, like working with difficult people in terms of this kind of meditation. Now, first of all, this is why it's so important to cultivate self-love first. And in the ancient practice, that is the step before cultivating it for others. So when we cultivate compassion and love for ourselves, we open to our own wounding, our own pain, and work with healing that with our innate loving kindness. And that is a whole transformational process. And usually, we recommend doing that for some months, some time in your meditation, before trying to tackle difficult people or challenging people that are hard to feel love for. And once we've really worked more deeply with our own pain and trauma, then, and that, as you know, may require psychotherapy as well as meditation. And this is a process. I mean, that obviously can take years, but we can also work with the meditation practice alongside and work with the self-love. And then when we start working with others in our meditation of breathing in where they are, their suffering, having it transform through this powerful light of awakened awareness in the heart, and then go back to them as healing energy and love. We start with the people that we naturally feel close to, naturally feel love for, and over time build up that muscle of the heart and include people that, we really feel neutral about. And then eventually, when we've really gone through all of that, we turn to the difficult people. And in a sense, we realize that their behavior may be really destructive or unwholesome, and we do not care for their behavior at all. But as a human being, they are trying to be happy in the best way they can. And they may be going about that in completely screwed up ways, but at the core, they're trying to be happy, and they're very confused about how to go about that. And in that way, we can begin to feel compassion for them, and then we can begin to have a sense of, we hope that this ignorance clears, this confusion clears, and that they're able to pursue happiness in a way that's much more wholesome. And so in that way, we can move toward actually having loving kindness for those people that are really difficult. And it, as I mentioned, it's in no way condoning their actions, and it's in no way saying that we have to have an association with these people, that we have to hang out with them.
Yeah.
But in the heart, we're working on transforming our bitterness, our grudges, into loving kindness.
I have an example of this. Some months ago, I had a client at a center that I work at, and I had done a meditation in one of the groups, and she had asked permission from one of the staff to contact me after. She said she had something really pressing that she wanted to tell me. So I said it was okay to give her my number, and she called. And she said, I have to tell you, the most amazing thing happened. Right in the meditation, when you said to bring to mind somebody with who I have put out of my heart. Those were the words she used, and that was the meditation. My mother called me. The phone vibrated, and I did not know who it was, but it was in my pocket, and I just let it sit. And after I went and saw that it was my mother that called me just at that moment, and I have not had any connection with her for 3 years.
Wow. Wow.
And she realized her power at that moment, right? The power of this process.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's amazing. And that is part of this love on every breath practice, that when we work through our issues inside of ourselves and come to more of a loving place, and also let go of some of the stuff we're holding on other people, it opens up the space for them to show up differently.
Yeah.
In our lives.
Yes.
And amazing things can happen.
Amazing things can happen. And that's not to say that the relationship gets repaired with these people, It's
not necessarily, although the door maybe is open.
Yes.
More for that.
But
yes.
It serves our healing and expansion of our own consciousness and awareness as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you to define love, because people define it in so many different ways, but the intention of love on every breath means what?
That's a huge question, isn't it?
Yes.
In the book, I talk about different kinds of love, and we're all familiar with romantic love. We're familiar with the love like a parent has for a child, or a platonic for a friend, or maybe a sibling. So all of these kinds of love are, very important for us as human beings. And at the core of that is what in Buddhism is seen as part of our essential true nature, and research is starting to prove this now, that we have this innate kindness and care for others. And so that's what, research is starting to point at, that there is this innate loving kindness, that innately we do care about others. And in this sense of the spiritual, we're cultivating what we could call like a universal love that includes ourselves and all beings.
As you are speaking, the word reverence comes to mind. And I'm thinking, okay, replace the word reverence for love, reverence on every breath.
Mm-hmm. It's a little different. That's a good distinction, actually, because reverence is a beautiful quality. The love is a little bit more active in a sense. Like love on every breath is giving out the love. So reverence in a way is like an internal experience. And in the sense of this love on every breath, there's the opening into and then the sending out. So it's a very active process of engaging with others, engaging with our felt experience from a place of love, and meeting our experience with love, meeting others with love.
As an action, as a verb.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, you have been an absolute joy and delight. The book we're speaking of today is Love on Every Breath. The author is my guest, Lama Palden Drolma. To learn more about Lama Palden's work, please visit www.lamapalden.org. On Twitter, you can find her at Lama Palden, and on Facebook, Lama Palden Drolma. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lisa. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thanks for joining us on Harvesting Happiness. This is Lisa Cypers-Kamen, and my guests today, Dr. Ravi Chandra and Lama Palden Drolma, wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Go out and rock your day.
Keep harvesting your own happiness anytime and anywhere, from the comfort of wherever you are. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes via our free app or from our libraries at toginet.com, iTunes, Google Play, and other fine podcast platforms. To learn more about Lisa's global consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Spread more joy by liking us on Facebook at Harvesting Happiness and following Lisa on Twitter at Lisa Kamen. Harvesting Happiness is produced in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU Radio Malibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.